Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. And today we will do a bit of a lab session where we will work on a data set. I will start off with loading the data set, telling you how the folder structure goes, what the data set looks like. And the idea really in this session would be for you, for everyone attending this session, to be working with us. I will introduce you to the data set, what it looks like. Then Adrienne and Abhishek will take over to do a bit more analysis on it and show you visualization. So I will share my screen and we will take you through each step that basically this would be a recap of the sessions that have happened previously when it comes to data analysis and data management. So I will share my screen and let me know when you can see it. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we can see it now.
Excellent. So if everyone could go to their email inboxes and download this data set, which is called the Nigeria Data _ Bureaucracy Lab. In the last session, Dan had sent this on the chat as well and requested everyone to download it. Adrienne also sent a follow-up email to everyone requesting them to download it. And I've also forwarded that email again, just so it's easy for you all to find. So if everyone could go ahead and download this, then that would be great, because really the idea is for everyone to work with us, just so it's more practical, and the aims of the lab session are met. So once I will give you about a few seconds to download this, because this is a fairly small file. It's a zip file.
Maybe you can raise your hand when you have that file downloaded.
Downloaded it. I can see 4 documents in it.
Thank you.
I've also downloaded it. Yes.
All right, so we will go ahead. As you see, it's a zip file. And once you open the zip file, I'll double click on it. And then you open this folder and you see 4 files within the zip file. So the first one is the civil servant survey, which is the officials questionnaire. The second one is the civil servant survey, which is the organization's questionnaire. The third one is a data set, which is in the CSV format. And the fourth one is a code book. Now, first of all, once we get this data, what is it? What is the first thing that we should do? We have this fresh data from wherever. So this could have been, this is survey data, but this could have been admin data. This could have been data from someone else. So what is it? What are some of the few things you should do as soon as you get your data set in terms of the folder structure? Please feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak, or write down in the chat. Okay, I understand that we've just started the session and there may be some initial inertia. So just to go back a couple of sessions, we learned that once we get the data, we have to organize it in a way that it's reproducible and it's easy to find and it's systematic. So one of the things that we can do here is go ahead on our directory. Let's say for me, my directory is documents. And I create a new project, which is, let's say, the Nigeria HR project. Within this, I will try to create 3 folders just so it's easy to see what my where my data files go. So the first folder that I will create is a raw folder where all my raw data will go. Second folder that I will create is where my code will go. And the third folder that I will create is the output folder. These 3 folders will in turn tell you that this is, so I should actually name the Nigeria HR project as Nigeria data. So like in a project, you will have multiple things. So I should just call this the data folder. So this is my main data folder. And this is where I will start putting in the data that we just got. So I go back to where I got my data. And then I copy this raw data, which is in the CSV form, to my Nigeria data folder in the raw
Hello,
data.
Mantasha.
Yes.
Sorry, are we to see on the screen what you are doing? Because I can't see anything on my screen. Or we should follow it from the mail that you sent.
Oh, you can others, Abhishek and Adrienne, can you see my screen?
Your
Yeah,
screen is being shared.
Yeah, we can see.
Yeah, but I can't see the screen.
Yes, we can see. Yes, we can see.
Yeah, in case you can't see my screen, maybe it would be helpful if you leave the meeting and join again, just in case sometimes it's a technical bug with Teams. All right, so this is where we put the raw data. In the code in the folder which is named code, this is where we will write all our code. Now you could be using any statistical software like Stata, or you could also be using Excel. So essentially code is where you will do all your analysis, and whatever comes out of that analysis will go into the output folder. One more thing I want to point out is that you have this data folder and it's called the Nigeria HR data. Another folder that you should have in your project structure
Sorry,
should be,
Mantasha.
yes.
I've joined, but still I can't see the screen.
Let me just stop sharing and I will share again.
Okay, thank you.
Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, I can see it anyway. I can see it.
I can also see.
Excellent.
Nadia can also see.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry for those who can't see it because sometimes it's a glitch, but we will also send a recording of it, and the recording will have all of my screen on it. So don't worry in case you want to follow up later. I want to go back to the folder structure again, and then because in the zip file that we downloaded, which is here, we also have a code book. So this code book, the question is, they form a very important part of the project, and they will help you to decipher the data in itself. And we can put them in a folder which is called documentation. So I can go back to my documents again, and then within my documents, I can have another folder which is called Nigeria HR underscore documentation. Now this is where I will put all of my documentation related to the data. So all right, now that we have this, we have our folders, we have the raw data in its rightful place. What I will do is I try to mostly work on Stata, but you will have no problems in understanding what's going on. If you want to open your data in Excel, feel free to do so. But what I have done is I will go to the Stata interface and I will import the CSV file to my Stata. And we have this data. So I would request everyone to please open the data. You don't have to open this in Stata or in any other statistical software. Just using plain Excel would be great because it's simple to understand. So once you open this, and then we go back to the documentation folder. Now the documentation has something called the Nigeria codebook. And this is a document that will help us understand what each of these variables and a few observations, what all of these mean. So one of the questions that I want to ask you is, so in a few previous sessions, we learned that there are a few things you should look for once you have a data set open. So what is the first thing you want to look for every single time you open a new data set? What are maybe the first couple of things that you should check in this data? You have never seen this data before. You recently got it from a survey. So what is it as an analyst that you should look for in this data? And we have discussed this with Louisa before in one of the past sessions.
Are we to look
Hello.
for the variables?
Yes. Sorry, please go ahead.
I said in this data, we have to look for the common variable.
Yes, I wouldn't say the common variable, but maybe like a variable that will uniquely and fully identify observations, right? You need to look for a uniquely and fully identifying ID variable. And you also need to look at the unit of observation. What is the unit that each observation is giving us? So this data set is not uh, an individual level data set. This is aggregated, and we will come to it later once we open the code book and start matching the variables with the code book. But for now, when you look at the first column, you have something called the organization ID. This is the ID that uniquely identifies each organization in this data set. So that is something that you should look for. Each observation, basically each row in this data set does not currently have a uniquely identifying ID, but that's okay because this is in the long form of data, and maybe later on Adrienne will tell you a little bit on how to reshape data. But for now, we know that there is a unique ID for each of these organizations, and that's known as the organization ID. Now, the next thing we will do is we will go to the code book, because this is the best document to tell us what the data is, right? Now, when you open the code book on your laptops, you will see there is a very clear presentation of what are the variables presented in the aggregate data. So you have, the first thing is the organization ID, which is the unique ID for each document. And I go back to my data set and I see that there is an organization ID, and this is the unique ID for each organization. Then we have something called the organization name, the state, name of the organization. So we go back again. We see this, we have the organization name, we have the state. Please do see that some organizations have missing values when it comes to the state, whereas some organizations do have the state field populated. Then the third one is ADM, and it's generally a code for Nigeria's administrative units. Then we have the type of respondents here. So this is, are they officials, or is it at whether these respondents are in the official level survey or at the organization level survey? Because remember, this data set, and we will come to the code book again, like this data set has two questionnaires combined into one. So the first one is the officials questionnaire, and you see the officials here, responses of officials, and then you also have the organization's questionnaire, and you have responses from those questionnaire here as well. So this is a combined data set and presents data on an aggregate level. Then we have this column, which is the number of respondents per organization interviewed in each organization. So let's say we look at Citizenship and Leadership Training Center. This survey was at the officials level, and the number of respondents in this organization were 84. The next column, please let me know if you can't follow it, because really the aim of this session is for everyone to go through this together and come up with questions in case there are any. Then the next the next variable is the survey question. So this survey question is what we will match with in the questions later on, and we will also go through it. The next next variable is overall, and this is the share of respondents choosing the given option. So we don't have a variable. Basically, we don't have information on what each person said in response to a given question, but we do have a variable which tells us what is the overall share of this answer. So let's say in the Citizenship and Leadership Training Center, which was an officials level survey, how many people were of service grade level G01, and what percentage of people, what proportion of people? And we see there were really none. But there were about 25.3% of people in grade level G07, right? So this is how this data, the overall variable is given. And it's very important for you to understand, because later on in the session, this is what we will primarily use. Then the other variables in this data set are slightly more statistically advanced. So I'm not going there, but really in this data set, these are the variables that you should look at definitely. You could also, you could also look at these variables, which are female and male. And these tell us, so female would be the mean share of female respondents choosing the given option of a question, and male would be the share of male respondents, men, who chose the given option of a question. Then as you go through the code book, you have questions from the officials data set, because remember, again, we have two surveys in one data set. One is the officials data set, and the other one is the organization's data set. So we have these two questionnaires as well in the zip file. This is the organization's questionnaire. Sorry. And this is the officials questionnaire. But we will keep flicking through the code book just so we reference one document. So it's really simple. So we have questions from the official data set, and we will find those questions in the variable which is called the survey question, right? So if you go through each of these observations, you will have an identity that matches the questions from the officials data set. So we have the first one is sex, whether it's male or female. And there we go. We have gender, male, female. Then we have what is the service grade level. So in Nigeria, there are 1 to 17 grade levels. So is it G1 to G17? We have G1 here, goes to G2, G3, all the way to G17. It's G18 for some reason here, but it's probably, yeah, that's a minor error, but it could be the G17 or G18. Then we have what is your highest completing schooling education, and there are like multiple options for it. And when you go back to the data set, you will see the highest completed schooling qualification. Is it doctorate? Is it a first degree? Is it JSS? Is it master's? Is it other or SSS? So this is all in the context of Nigeria. And here you see the proportion of respondents that who say they are of a certain education level, right? And this is how it really goes in the whole data set. You go through the survey questionnaire variable, and you go through this code book, and you will see each of these options here in the code book reflected in the variable name survey question. And then you go a bit further down, and then you will see the organizer. So right now we're looking at the officials questionnaire, and you go a bit further down, you will have questions from the organizational data set. So maybe if I scroll, and yeah, I scroll slightly and I come to this variable, which is called the type of respondent. We have questions again from the organization's data set. And we can go back and look at the questions in the code book. So what is the intended coverage of your organization? Is it national, zonal? And let's check if we have the same thing here in the survey question. Yes, we do. So we do have the first question here is intended coverage of the organization. Is it national? Or is it other? Or is it river basin? Is it state? Is it zonal? And in the next column, as usual, as I said before, you will see the proportion of respondents that gave this particular response. So we see that others, basin, state, and zonal, there are no respondents from these areas of coverage in the National Agency for Control of AIDS, right? So yes, I think this is how we wanted you to like look at the data set and maybe start exploring it. Just even like eyeballing the data sometimes can tell you a lot, even if you do not know a statistical software, or you don't really know how to calculate using code. Maybe just looking at data like this and looking at the code book will tell you tons of things about what you want to know about the data. So let's say one of the things maybe, and this is like a very, very small example of what I can use by what I can find out by using code. So let's say there are multiple organizations given here, right? And so we have the Citizenship and Leadership Center, we have the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, and each of these, so there are multiple. And each of these have a different organization ID as well. And let's say I want to know how many organizations do we have and what are their names. So maybe I can go to Stata and type tab. This is not a code. This is not like a coding session, but this is just an example of maybe what you should look for when you first open the data set and are exploring and playing around with it before beginning any type of serious analysis. So I can tab it and I see the names of all of the agencies, the organization. I can see names of all the organizations that are here, right? But this doesn't tell me how many unique organizations we have, right? So maybe another command could be so this will tell you we have 95 unique organizations, and each organization has this unique organization ID. So we know there are 95 unique organizations with 95 unique organization IDs. So really, this is how you can start looking and exploring the data that you get. This is a very different kind of data because this is at the aggregate level. A lot of times you will get data which is at the individual level, right? Which, let's say, within the bureaucracy lab team, what did Abhishek, Mantasha, and Adrienne say in response to a question? And those and that kind of data, when we have Abhishek, Adrienne, and Mantasha as each of the observations, those would be the individual level data where you will be able to see our responses. Whereas here, this is aggregate level, and you can't really know what each individual, let's say, in the Mass Literacy Commission, you can't know what each individual in the Mass Literacy Commission say about proportion of citizens who approach through contract. We can only know that on an aggregate level, about 0.125 proportion of the total people interviewed gave this response. So it's really easy once you explore this data, once you go through the code book to know what's going on. And once you understand what's going on, then you are in a better place to analyze it and go ahead and think of graphics and think of what you want to extract from this data. But as a first step, what you should really do is look at everything that you can about this data, maybe using small lines of code, exploration code, or just eyeballing it sometimes really works. So yes, that's all that I had for this time. I will hand over to Abhishek and Adrienne, who will take you through a bit more on analysis, on some cool visualizations that you can do, and maybe also show you things on Excel and compare the same thing on Stata. So Abhishek, over to you.
Thanks, Mantasha. So what I'm going to do now is just open the data set, and I'll be working on Excel because I think most of us work on Excel also because it's simpler. And as an example, one of the chart that we are going to create using the database that we have, Adrienne will show us how to do the same thing on Stata so that we can understand what are the advantages of working with Stata and also what are the disadvantages. So we can compare Stata and Excel both together. So let me share my screen. So I'll again start from scratch, open the data set on Excel, and then from there we'll begin eyeballing the data to doing some basic analysis. Can you all see my screen now?
Yes, we can, Abhishek.
Great. So see, basically, again, I have a folder called Nigeria. And again, not maybe exactly same as what Mantasha showed, but idea is the same. So I have a folder called input, where basically the raw data is sitting. And then I copy the same data set in output, because we are going to make changes to the data set, but we do not want to play with the original data set, because in case we make some mistake, the raw data should be there available, so that we can again refer back to the raw data. So the idea is, first we copy the data set in input, we do not make any changes to it, it remains there. And then we copy the same data set on output, and this is the data set that we will open and we will be working on. So let me just rename it. I just rename it to V1, so that it's different from how it is named in the input folder. Data documentation is where the code book, questionnaire, all of that would be, so that if you have to refer to understand the data set, you can come to documentation and read the document. Code, of course, it is empty. So when you work on Stata or R, then of course you have to write code, and then all the codes would come here. But when we work on Excel, one disadvantage is that, or also advantage, that it's simpler, so you don't have to write codes. But the disadvantage is that for others to understand how exactly you worked, what are the changes that you made, there is no code, so it's difficult for others to understand. And also, for them to see whether there is any mistake in the way we have made changes to the data or not. Just to show an example, if there was actually a data set on which we opened on Stata and worked on it. So this is from another project that I worked on. This was basically looking at how many people died because of COVID in India. So this is a project that I worked on. Then input, of course, all the raw data that we used for the project. So, on some complicated projects, there may not be one, but multiple data sets. So these are all raw data sets that we worked on. And then we made changes to this in raw data set. So we maybe combined it, made certain calculations, created new variables, and these are all output. Once we had those input, we used those input variable, input data sets, and made changes. We created charts also. So this is an output, but also the data set itself was changed. Maybe we added new variables, we did some calculations. So these are the data sets, these are the charts which we made using the input data. And this is where the do file, basically the code comes. So, all the data, all the coding that we did for generating figures, some manual, some calculations that we did. This is for appending all the different data sets that we use. So this is usually how folder structure should be, so that it's easier for anyone to refer to your work, so and understand what all has been done, and give you feedback as well. If they find something, something faulty, they can go through the code, let you know there is something wrong, please correct it. So that's why that's the advantage of working on Stata or any other software, because others can check your work carefully and also reproduce what you have done. Anyway, so coming back to our work, the Nigeria folder, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open this folder, this data set. Can you all see the data set now?
Yeah, Abhishek, I can.
Yeah, okay.
I'm
So
sure
see,
this-
this is
I can
how, great. So this is how, I'll again go briefly over what Mantasha just said, because we are now working on Excel. Same thing Mantasha showed on Stata, how it looks on Stata. So basically what we have, there are like multiple organizations, there are like 95 organizations, and for each of the organizations, we have collected data on various questions. And these are the questions. So whether, say, for example, this is an organization, Citizenship and Leadership Training Center. Whether it is a federal entity or a state entity or local entity, that we can see here. So see, for example, state is 0. That means it is not a state entity. It is not a local entity. It is a federal entity. And everything comes under ministry. So for basically for everything, it would be 1. So it is a federal entity. Then again, the next question for the same organization is, and how many proportion of female workers are there? So what you see here is 45%, and of course rest is 55% roughly, and that's male. Then question is how many workers are across different grades, G01 to G18. And here you see, so no one is in G1, G2 till G6, no one is till G6. G7 25%, G8 25%. You see all the numbers. Good night. Sorry, that's my son. Just it's night here, so I just wanted to say me good night. Sorry about that. So this is what you see here, all the information. And here, what Mantasha was saying is that this is aggregated at organization level. So what you see here is number of respondents. So this particular organization, there are 84 people who have been interviewed. And once we had responses from all these 84 people, it has been aggregated at the organization level. And that's why we have some of these numbers in proportion. So basically, out of 84 people, 45% are female, 55% are male. And then out of those 84, how many are at different grade levels? Similarly, when you go down, all the questions are there, which you can also refer to in the code book, like how many of them have doctorate degree, how many of them have first class, how many of them have master's degree, and so on. Again, it's a long list of questions. We are not going to go through each one of them. I'm just going to give you an example on once you have this raw data and you want to do some analysis, how do we proceed? Because it is Excel, of course, a lot of work has to be manual. So copy, pasting, some manual calculations we'll have to do. So you are prone to making certain mistakes. Whereas if you are using software like Stata or R, you write codes, but then the calculation will be done by the machine. So chances are very low that you will end up making mistakes. So that's another reason why we, so manual work we reduce when we are working on software packages. And then you are also, reducing chances of making mistakes. That is the advantage. But of course, advantage of Excel is that it's simpler to use, especially when you are making charts, a lot of flexibility. It becomes easier for maybe, most of our day-to-day work, Excel is fine. We don't need to do coding on Stata. So let me give you one example. So of course, there are many questions. So first thing to do, just to be able to visualize the data easily, is that we use a filter. So you go to Excel here and you click on this option called sort and filter, and here filter. And then what you see is that there's small boxes which will appear. And then you can click here and you can actually choose particular data that you want to look at. So here you can actually see like what the option that Mantasha used, tab, it gave you info on all the organizations that are there. And then again, that simply you can see here. I go to organization name, I look at all the organizations that are here. You can simply look at here. So all the organizations that are there, they are named here. And if you want to focus specifically on particular organization, you can, choose that organization. For example, first of all, I unclick this option so that then, and suppose I want to choose a particular ministry, say this, Akure North Local Government Area. So now what you will see in this Excel, you will only have information for this particular, all other organizations are gone and you can only see. So it becomes simple. You only see information concerning this particular organization. Anyway, let me now select all. What is more important is survey questions that are there. And just an example, I'm going to choose one particular survey question and analyze the responses for that particular survey question. So one thing of interest is I want to know overall how many male vis-a-vis female are working in different organizations. So here I choose this option, gender female. And then what you see is for all the organizations, you have information on how many respondents are there, and then how many of them are female. So 45%, 53%, 71%. female are there for each of these. So it becomes easier to now visualize. So because again, it is Excel, so we have to do some copy pasting. So once I have this data set, just to make it simple, I only am going to copy variables that I need. So I copy this, I open a new tab, and I paste the data. And just to make it easier for people to understand what exactly this tab is looking at, I rename the tab and I rename it male, female, or maybe even simpler, female workforce. That is the first thing. The variable of interest, I filter that from the raw data here, and then I copy it in new tab. So you see now you're making changes into the original data set, and that's why we need to have a different data set without making any change in the original input folder. So I save it first to save my work. And now I'm going to analyze the data set. But of course, I mean, the way it is right now, it could be very complicated. Basically, I am interested in looking at, I mean, how the proportion of female workforce differs across different organizations. So first thing that I'm going to do is basically what you have to do, you have to make you can make different charts, line chart or bar chart. In this case, I think it makes more sense to have a bar chart, and I insert a bar chart. Let me move it here. The first thing is that for others to understand what exactly this chart is, we should have some information which is missing here. For example, we do not know what is this 147. It is because we have not. These are basically organizations here. So people will not understand what is 1, what is 4, what is. So let me first make that change. So the way to do it is, for example, I'm sure most of you have worked on it, but anyway, let me just go through it. I mean, right click and then select data. And this is where we have to put information for all the organizations. So I choose all the organizations. And you see for all the organizations, because there are so many organizations, of course, not all of them are visible, but if you increase the chart size, then you will be able to see. Also, you can decrease the font size here. And then if you decrease it even more, all the organization codes would be visible. But then this is some more stuff to do. We should have access titles. So these are basically organization ID. And this is percent of female workforce. We can name it, say, a female workforce across organizations. Now, I mean, this is very basic, but of course, this is not visually very informative, and we need to make certain changes. So one change that we should do is, it will be great if we can first arrange the data in, say, increasing or decreasing order. So again, what would be very useful is using the filter option here. So once now that filter boxes are there, here I choose the option smallest to largest. So now it's easier to look at the data that, and then the first thing that you would notice is that, okay, there are in some organizations where there are only, say, 25% female workforce, but then there are for certain organizations where 100% of the workforce are female. So again, just looking at this data, you immediately get a sense. I mean, if you feel that, okay, not having enough female in the organization is a problem and we should have that gender parity, you immediately get a sense, okay, what are the organizations where they're less than 50% female? And you can eyeball at this chart and see how, things differ across different organizations. So you can then maybe specifically focus on those organizations. And then from there, you can start a conversation with these organizations, or maybe you can look at other data sets which tries to explain maybe what is wrong or right with certain organizations and why they are able to attract more female vis-a-vis some other organizations. But there are many other things that you can still do with and make it more informative and make it easier for people to understand. So
hello.
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
So with this your data, what particular projects were you working on?
Yeah, so I this particular project, I was not part of it. Dan was actually part of it. So in the year, if I'm not wrong, 2011 or 12, when he was still a PhD student, he was working with the Nigeria Civil Service Office. And as part of the work, he surveyed different organizations in the government. I think all the organizations were covered. And the idea was to look at, broadly understand what are the issues that the organizations and the workers in the bureaucracy, they complain about. Do they feel that the pay is not enough? Do they feel that the skills that they are taught during the time of training is not enough? Just to maybe give you a sense here, so you would also see questions. So I come back to the raw data again here. And you would see, let me go through all the questions. Say, for example, extent to which employees trust each other. This is a question. So is it an issue that whether employees trust each other or not? Or say, for example, you want to look at whether you work directly with the boss or not. And if you work directly, maybe chances are that you are happier with the job. What percent of staff is doing most of the work? So if there is equitable distribution, you should see 50% or 5. So some organizations say that only 5% people do most of the work. Some organizations say that 50%, more than 50% people do the work. So how is the distribution of work? And then there are questions related to corruption, questions related to control, say career path, whether people who are civil servants, they have control over career path or not. So there are like bunch of questions. The idea was basically to understand public administration in Nigeria. And this was not my project, but Dan's project. And he interviewed all the organizations, and based on the data, he produced a report looking at some of these things, like how many people are happier with their job, if they are not happy, why they are not happy, some of those things. Just to show you an example, so this is the report that he produced. So here, see, for example, in the report, key issues raised by civil servants. Now, this comes from this data set only. So what is it that civil servants are complaining about? Political will and leadership. Most of the people complain that maybe there is not enough political will, or they're not happy with the leadership. Many people are not happy with the welfare package, which is basically your pay, pension, and maybe other stuff. Again, I mean, these are the issues that were highlighted in the project.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So one thing that we would want to know is, here coming back to this data set. So yes, we have how many women across different organizations. Ideally, maybe, if we have a notion of what is fair, it could be, there should be, say, 50-50% distribution. That would be fair. So we can make it slightly, we can redefine this chart. So say, for example, we feel 0.5, which is 50%, is what is ideal. So we can just draw a line here. So I am just plotting a line. But again, this is also bar chart. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to make some basic changes. So change chart series type. So the second line which I'm talking about is this series 2, and I make it a line chart. So then what you see is that this is your 50% line basically. And you can see what are the organizations where are less than 50% people, what are the organizations where more than 50% people are female. But what you basically see is that, I mean, most of the organizations have more than 50% female, and maybe, I mean, good or bad, that is debatable. I mean, research shows that there are also some bad impact if there are many female in public sector, but we are not getting into details. But if we believe that, you know, having more female is good, what you see is that Nigeria does pretty well. But still, there are certain organizations where this number is much lesser than 50%, specifically these say 3 or 4 organizations here. And then there are a bunch of other organizations where it is less than. So basically what you can now do, rather than looking at all these numbers here, you can, most of the information is here that you want to show to your maybe boss that, okay, see, this is how the distribution looks like. 50% line is this, and then, you know, you immediately understand what are the organizations where there is some issue, and then maybe you can focus on some of these organizations that we are looking here. So this is one thing. Other thing is, what you can also show in this data set is, okay, what is the average? As of now, we are showing each and every organization, but suppose I also want to understand what is the average. So I'm going to calculate average female across all departments. So at the very end, I'm just naming it total. And I mean, there are the simplest way of calculating average, although it is not very accurate. I mean, ideal way is that, you know, you do a sum product like 33 out of 33, 93% female. So you calculate exact number of female workers for each, and then, you know, do that calculation. But just to save time, what I'm going to do, I'm just calculating a simple average of averages across all the. So 60, around 65% is the average. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to include average, a line for a bar for average as well for in the chart. Again, I'm going to filter smallest to largest, then the average will move from, see, it is no more at the bottom, but it has gone to its place where it is supposed to be. It will, now I make the change in the data set, and I basically, because we have one more variable now, so we need to extend the line here and another 0.5 here, and this line also. Anyway, these are simple things which I'm sure all of you do, but I'm just, the idea is to show basic data. How can you make certain small changes to make it more informative? So there should be a line for a bar for total somewhere. Okay, it is not coming because one more change that I need to make, which is, sorry. Okay, it should be there. It's that I can't see the total line as of now. Let me increase the. So this line is total. Just to make it different from all other lines so that people immediately understand what is the average, I you know, choose a different color for this so that you know the total line is here. But there is something wrong here. Let me see, because this number should have been higher. Let me see what mistake I made. Oh, sorry, I made a mistake, and I'll tell you what I did. Let me delete this line first. The problem was that it was a formula, and of course when I changed the ordering, the formula also changes and numbers change. So that is another problem when you work on Excel, that these are some of the manual things which you'll have to do. Again, what I'm going to do is calculate the average again. This is a formula, and if I reorder the data, of course, the formula itself will change. So I'm going to copy and paste it as value. So now when I make changes, this is the right number and it will not change. So I'm going to reorder it again. Now, because again, there is one extra row, so I have to extend. For some reason, I can't get rid of this. Let me move it. And now it's fine. Sorry, for some reason I can't get rid of this particular thing, but you can see now that there is a line for total. So another way of looking at it is, yes, 50%, how many organizations are below 50%, but also what is the overall average for Nigeria as a whole, and what are the organizations which do better than average, what are the organizations which do worse than average. So you can make that comparison as well. Again, this is something very basic. You have the data, but you make certain changes just to have as much information as possible in the chart. Any questions, anyone?
Hello, Abhishek.
Yes, please.
Could there be another way of representing this data? Let's say you are using a dotted graph.
What graph, sorry?
A dotted graph, like
okay. For yeah, a dot for each of the organizations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can try and do that. So basically, what we can do then, say for example, because you want to, see, these are basically, again, all I have to do is insert it as dot plot, scatter. And then you would see that there are one dot for each. The problem here would be, of course, there are different dots, but naming each of the dots. So we do not immediately understand, okay, what is this dot? Which organization are we referring to? And so getting that naming done correctly becomes a challenge. There is no easy way of doing it here. Basically, here what you will have to do is that you will have to add data labels. So then we'll have to format data labels. And what I need right now, the data labels are Y values, but I don't want Y values, but I want organization codes. And now it is done. Now you will see. But then because there's so many data labels here, visually it's very difficult to understand, like, okay, this is SM09, SM what, because there's so many data points, it becomes a challenge. But yes, had there been fewer organizations, we could have used data as well, a dot plot as well. We can use line as well, and these are all different ways of plotting the same information. It's just about you make these charts, but what you feel better captures all the information. Say, for example, here we can see that, visually it's better, perhaps, at least in this case, to use a bar chart, because you can name all these different organizations one can see here. You can also have all these different lines. For example, okay, I can have a line for uh, uh, what is fair, say 50%. Also, a separate bar can be there for average, so that comparison becomes slightly easier. So you can have basically a lot of other information when if you plot it as a bar chart, but not to say that this is the best way all the time. Maybe in this case, because there's so many different organizations, it is slightly better. And because one can also argue that there's so many information, and we will take another example. Maybe what we can do is that we can further aggregate the data. So we can maybe not have data for all the organizations in the chart, but we aggregate it by its local level, federal level, and state level. So basically just 3 bars instead of having so many bars. But then maybe in many of the cases, it's very useful to have a look at each of the organizations so that we understand, okay, where is the problem. Maybe if you aggregate it at state level, you will not see the problem. But if you have data for each of the organizations, you would get to know that, okay, there are 3 or 4 different organizations where the problem is. And then you can start delving deeper, that why these organizations are lagging, what can be done to make sure that there are more female participation. But yeah, I mean, this is a simple way of plotting the chart. Any other question before I ask Adrienne to show maybe the same thing, how to do it on Stata, and then we will understand what is the advantage or also maybe disadvantage of working on Stata. Any other question related to the chart, or any suggestion how can we make it better? Okay. Okay. So I'll hand it over to Adrienne for now. You can come back with your questions later. We will look at maybe one more example of how to visualize the data. But for now, I'll stop sharing, and Adrienne will just go through the same thing on Stata.
Let me share my screen. It's a bit slow. Can you tell me if you can see my screen?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, great. So again, this isn't a coding session, but we wanted to give you some idea of the differences between working in Excel and working in Stata, or really this applies, what I'll show you applies to any other software. Like if you wanted to use R, what I'll show you will apply, the general ideas will apply. Just so you know, what are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, when might it be worthwhile to use a statistical software or a programming language, and when Excel is perfectly useful and maybe the better choice. So, okay, we'll start again the same way. So the first thing I'm going to do is import the data. So this line imports the data, and you can see when I highlighted it and ran it, the data came in, and I can just browse the data, and you can see I have all the data, and it looks pretty much exactly the same as it does in Excel. And then the first thing I'm going to do is create a very basic bar graph that's similar to the one that Abhishek just made. So to give us an idea, this is my basic bar graph. And it's already a little bit more complicated than what you do in Excel. You have to know the specific syntax, the specific words. But one of the nice things that you can do is I can write comments on the side that tell somebody else exactly what I did. And they can look at the code as well and see exactly what I did and how I arrived at the results. Whereas when you added a total row in Excel, that might not be immediately obvious to somebody when they open the spreadsheet. When you copy and paste as values so that it's no longer a calculation, that might not be immediately obvious to somebody when they look at your Excel. But here people can see exactly what you did without having to try it themselves. So that's one positive. Just to explain a little bit about what it's doing here, I'm telling it that I want to graph a bar. I'm saying when that survey question is gender female. So we're going to make exactly the same graph that we just did in Excel. I'm doing it over organization ID. So I get one bar for each organization ID. I'm going to sort the bars based on that overall variable. So based on that mean. And then I'm going to label my bars. So all I have to do is run this. And it makes a simple graph for me. Now I want to add some formatting the same way that we did in Excel. So this was pretty simple. Now we see the disadvantage of Stata, because in Excel you can, they have a nice interface. You can try different things. You can filter the data in different ways and sort it, and it's very easy to see how you can make changes. Here, it already looks quite complicated, and there's a lot that you have to write. And I can tell you, I wrote this code last night, and I hadn't done a total bar like this before, and it took me quite some time to write this code, definitely longer than it took to create that graph in Excel. But just to give a demonstration, I'm going to run this, and I can make exactly the same graph as we had in Excel, with everything sorted, with the total bar colored red, with this line at 50%. So anything that's possible in Excel, we can also do in Stata. Are there any questions about this? I'm not planning on going through exactly what I did here, but I can come back to it if someone's interested. But let me give you a demonstration now. So this is why Excel is great and Stata or statistical programming languages are difficult. Now let me show you the advantage. So we had 433 survey questions. Right here, we are just graphing for the survey question, gender female. So this, we made a graph for one survey question, but we have 433 survey questions. This is the strength of programming. So instead of making, now that I have this code to make the graph for one survey question, I can just as easily make the graph for every survey question or all survey questions. So all I've done is added these two lines where I say for levels of the survey question. So for each like category of survey question, I'm going to run this. So for each question, I'm going to run. And then, oops, I can, the rest of the code is exactly the same as above. I've only added those two lines. And now, let me make sure I got everything. Now I can run this. and it will make me the same graph for every survey question. So I can just click one button and let it run, and I will end up with 433 graphs, all formatted exactly the same way, all with the total bar, all with all of the information that I need about them. And this is especially helpful, for example, when we're exploring data and we don't know what will be most interesting. Sometimes when we just look at the spreadsheet, it's hard to know which are the interesting questions. So I can just run this loop and create all the graphs, and then I have a nice visual where I can click through and find the graph that looks the most interesting, where I see big differences between organizations. And that will be my guide to understand which questions I want to put in my report and what further analysis I want to do. It can also be very helpful to do something like this when, for example, you want to make a report, you have a lot of graphs to make, and you want everything formatted the same way. You can write one piece of code to format, and then you just run that code for all of the different graphs. And if you want to make changes to the formatting, you just make those changes in one place, whereas in Excel, you would have to copy and paste and redo everything for each graph every time. And then that would start to take a long time. So in Stata or another programming language, the cost, the time you have to spend to start is much longer than in Excel. But if you're doing the same thing over and over again, it can save you a lot of time. So let me stop. It's still going. That's one of the basic advantages. I wanted to show you one more thing. So right now, this data, as we saw, is in a long format. So we have one row for each question, whereas we might be more used to having survey data where we have one row for each organization, and then there's a variable for each survey question with the mean of the responses for that survey question. So that would be what we would call a wide format. And in Excel, to change this data from long to wide is really quite difficult and very manual, where you'd have to copy and paste or write a complicated calculation to put these, instead of being in one column, have one row for each question, and then move this under the appropriate question. And it would be very complicated, and it would probably take a very long time. I don't know if any of you have ever tried to do that, but I have tried to do that, and it takes forever and is maybe not worth it. You just end up trying to do your analysis in a different way. But in Stata or in R, it's really the same. We can do this in 2 lines. So you saw how my data is right now. I can just simply run this code. Oh, sorry, I have to. In fact, I'm going to bring in my raw data again because I've made some changes to it. And then, so again, this is exactly the same as you have in the Excel. And then I'm just going to run this. And it takes a while because there are a lot of questions. Oh, it's taking quite some time. Okay. And now, 5 seconds later, I have it where I have survey question 1, and then all of the information, survey question 2, and I have each row is one organization. So this is the first organization, the official survey, and then the organization survey. This is the second, and it's all in one row. And actually, maybe this is easier to see. I'm going to just keep overall instead of also having female and male, because that makes it a lot wider. And this will be easier to see. And after a few seconds, now we can see, so for survey question 1, this is the survey question. And then I have my overall answer is 1, and then I have survey question 2, and I can keep going. So anything unusual about the organization, service grade level. I'm trying to get to some more interesting questions. How many utilize the skills learned in highest qualification? You have each of these all in one row, which can sometimes make it a little bit easier to analyze. And that's very easy to do in Stata, whereas it would take a long time and be very difficult and prone to error in Excel. So there are advantages and disadvantages. I hope that was helpful to understand why people choose these different methods. Are there any questions before we go back to Excel and do some more visualizations? Oh, sorry, I wasn't looking at the chat, but I see. Oh, you can't see anything on my screen. I think it might be because it's in Stata. Because I noticed that on Mantasha's as well. I don't unfortunately think there's anything that I can do to change it. Any other questions? I'm sorry. Maybe it will show up more nicely in the video.
Yeah, hopefully the video should be clearer. Otherwise, what we can do, what Adrienne just did, maybe we'll record just that part separately at some point of time so that it's clear. And just for this particular part, we'll share the video separately.
Yeah.
In case it is not clear in the recorded video, we'll make a separate video for the coding part.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to see if there's a way that I can make this like a black background instead of a white background, but so it might come up more clearly, but I don't see it. I'll have to investigate. I hope it was still useful in some way. I'm sorry that it was hard to see.
Like now it's clear.
Oh.
Again, yeah, now it's not. I think it will take some time. So basically, you need to leave it for a few seconds and then it becomes clear. But because we keep making changes and move, so it never becomes clear. It becomes clear after some time lag, yeah.
Good to know for the next video. Any changes about any questions about what I said? Or we can go back to Excel, which hopefully will make things clear again.
Yeah, maybe we will record it separately. And
hello. Yeah, my problem is, you see, it looks as if the presentation is not interactive in the sense that we're learning to apply to a situation. So, or I would, in this sense, be happy that what you are presenting, you apply to something. Take something that this what's, for instance, doing. You want to do this. This is the data you gather. This is the way you are analyzing it, and then it gives me the insight that in case I'm doing this, this is how we're managing the data. But excuse me, you talk. We are just quiet looking at you, and you really don't know whether we are taking in what you are, presenting. I don't know how you feel it. So for me, I know we learn to apply. So your presentation should kind of, be linked to application, giving the learner the insight that if you are taking this thing, is the way you are going to apply it, the way you are going to apply it. Somebody may learn, but when it comes to application, it becomes difficult. So the presentation must be, blended with, application stuff like that. That's my.
No, that's a very valid point, and I agree. I mean, it's challenging because in one session to look at the data, and also if one is not familiar and working on it itself, it may not be very useful. Unfortunately, I mean, we try to find something that you people are working on. Maybe, I mean, individually we cannot maybe look at, but what we can do is, I mean, if you have a data set that you are working on and you are familiar with, and you can share it with us, and you have specific questions, maybe we can go over it again so that people, because it's your data set, you would understand it better. You will also have specific questions, and maybe that would be more useful. The idea here was basically that first, like how you organize the data, just the basics. Coding, I understand. I mean, if it's not your data and you are not very familiar with it, it could be difficult. And even charts, the idea was just to, if you have a data and you have a question in mind, for example, what we try to show is that how many female are employed in different sectors. So you have the data, but it may not be very informative, and then how to maybe just produce a simple chart. That was the basic idea. But of course, I mean, it may not be very easy to relate with the data because it is not something that is your own, and you yourself are working on it. And that's a valid point. And maybe what we can do, I mean, if there is a data that you are working on, and you have specific questions and you would like us to maybe just look at it, you can teach us that, okay, this is what I have done, and maybe we can then also add some value to it. Hopefully that would be more useful. uh, but yeah, I mean, I agree to your point that it can become challenging to actually relate with the data set that we are showing, because this is the first time, and the data set is not easy, because ideally when you start working on a project, it takes days to just eyeballing the data, understanding the data before we can even start analyzing it.
Okay.
So point well taken, and please feel free to maybe, some specific data that you have and you would want us to look at it.
Thank you very much.
Or if you have as well, we've looked at some data together today. If you have something specific that you'd like to see us try with that data for now, we'd be happy to do that as well. But thank you again. Thank you for that feedback. It is helpful for us to hear how this goes, how this is feeling from the other side, especially because we're not in the same place. So we would like to be responsive to what you need.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, so I will share my screen now. I will just go through one more example. We have around, say, maybe 15 minutes to just go through one last example. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, I can also see it.
Okay, great. So I will, wait, not this one, but this one, sorry. So I'll come back to the raw data again, which has like all the questions that people have answered. aggregated at the organization level. And we'll pick one maybe question again and look at it differently from what we did earlier. So for example, when we come to survey questions, we were earlier looking at gender, what proportion of workforce is female, but now we choose a different question. Say for example, what proportion of workforce is happy with their current income? So I choose this particular variable of interest, and then for each of the organizations, what you see here, this organization, again the same information, how many respondents from this organization, and then what proportion of these respondents were happy with their current income. So this organization, out of 84, 55% people were happy with their income. Similarly, you have the same number for all the organizations. There are 95 organizations and you have 95 different values. So again, what we are going to do first thing is that this is what we want to see, what proportion of workforce is happy. So we just copy this data set first. We create a new tab. And we will rename it so that for others it's easier to understand what this tab consists. And we call it income info. So again, for each of the organizations, we have what proportion of respondents are happy with their current income. Again, the basic thing is first to just reorder the data from arranging to ascending or descending order, so that when we make chart, it looks slightly neater. We can exactly see how it's increasing when we move from one organization to another organization. So now we have arranged it. So what you see is that only 10% people are happy in this particular organization, Bureaucracy local government area. And it varies from 10% to almost 100%. So Federal Polytechnic, this particular organization, almost everyone is happy with their current income. So of course, there is a lot of variation. So just looking at an average number will not capture this variation. And that's why it's a good idea to plot bars for each of the organizations, so we understand how the variation is, what are the organizations where people are not happy, what are the organizations which are maybe ideal because their people are happy. If we, again, the first thing is, if you plot this chart, this is how it will look. Sorry, this is. Again, in this case as well, of course, one can make a line chart or maybe a dot plot, but it's about like which one is simpler to understand, captures more information, is neater. And as we saw in the previous example, if you make a dot plot, there's just too many organizations, and just a dot in itself may not be useful as long as we do not get to know what are those dots, which particular organization. And if we name each of the dots, because there are so many organizations, it becomes very cluttered, and it is not easy for people to get to know what are those different organizations. So first thing is that here, as of now, we do not know what are these organizations. So we make that change again. So that now we have information. So somebody who, because of course I mean, for us it is not easy to know what is LG4, SM9, but somebody who is from Nigeria, has worked on this data set, it's his or her own project, so they would be very familiar with these codes and they would know exactly what are these organizations. So again, this is the basic thing that we start with as we started with last time. But another thing that could be useful is there could be variation. Say maybe at the federal level the pay is generally better, maybe, so more people are happy. But state organizations or maybe local self governments, there these organizations may not have enough revenue, so even the wages could be slightly lower relative to federal. And we may see that relative to federal, very few people are happy with their current income in state or local government. Uh, but how do we do that? We need to have information. So right now we have organizations, but we do not know whether this particular organization, here it mentions state, so we know it is a state government, but many other, like whether it is federal or not, we need to have an identifier here which says whether it is a federal government or a state government or a local self-government. Now, to get that information, we will have to again come to the base data, because here one of the survey question is whether you are federal entity or a state entity or a local entity. So what we do if we choose just these three informations. And if you are a federal entity, you will choose 1. If you are a state entity, you will choose 1. If you are not, you will choose 0. So what we do here, because for us, what is important, uh, whether the answer was 1 or not, because if you are 1, that means you are particular, belong to particular set of organization. So now we choose 1. So again, what you have here, citizen and this particular organization is a federal entity. Similarly, for all the organizations, we have this information. So federal, now again, here we have local. Some of the organizations are local. And then there are few which are state. So what I'm going to do, this is again, we will have to copy, because in Excel, there's a lot of manual work involved. So we'll have to again copy this information. So organization code, organization name, and what kind of organization. Is it federal, local, or state government? Like I can't add a new tab because, wait a minute. So I add this information here. And again, I rename it so that it's easier for us to understand when we come back to this data set earlier. Level of government. So how many of you have used VLOOKUP option? Many of you must have worked on Excel and VLOOKUP. I'm sure some of you must have used. Is it okay if I show how we use VLOOKUP now, or is it something which is not required right now?
Oh, it's okay. Some of us are aware.
Okay, I'll just do it so that just to add a further layer of information on this income share here. So here again, level of government, we create a tab. And what I want to know is basically, see LG04, is it local government or a state government? We need that information. And that information is in this particular sheet. So FA01 is a federal government. Similarly, for all the organizations code we have, whether it is local or it is a state government. So what I'm going to do is, the way to do it is that I use VLOOKUP. And I want to basically search for this organization code from this particular sheet. So I come to this sheet. So the first row here, the first column has the code, and then the third column has the information that we need. So we choose from A to 3. We have to fix this thing. So basically the information is in 3. So whatever the information is in 3, it should get captured here. So now see, you get that information. This particular is a local government. And when you drag it, you have the information for each of the organizations. So for each of the organizations, now we have the information here, whether it is a federal government or a local government or a state government. Now I'm going to reorder it again because we want federal government information to be at one place, local government information to be at another place. So I'll filter it again. I'll filter it A to Z. So all the federal governments are first, then we have state government, and then we have local government. So the data is reordered now. And again, because we had previously ordered from increasing, so for federal, we have from increasing order. Again, when it comes to state, again, it starts in increasing order. Now, this could be useful if we reorder it this way, because now you understand that, okay, here to here is state government, federal government. And then SM4 to SM13 till here is state government. And LG03 to LG01 is local self-government. Now in the same chart, you can see distinctively three different entities. You can see how many people are happy when it comes to just this set of organizations which are federal. And you can see that on average, it looks like people are happier working with their income if they work with the federal government, and slightly lower for other set of entities. Now, because we do not have, I have like 5 minutes left so that we can then have more questions. I have like added certain layer of other information. Let me show that chart and I'll explain what all I have done. But like manually doing it here will take some time. So let me show in the same thing what I have done. So the same chart, and other thing which we should be careful about is also the color combination. I mean, you can choose what you know your bosses would be happy with or you feel is good. So like I usually choose bright color combination. So like I'll choose green, red. So all these small things also matter a lot. What basically what font you use, all those things can make difference. So here I have made some of those changes. So again, what I have done is basically for federal, I have calculated the average number separately for each three entities. And these are the lines that you see here. So in federal, around 58% people are happy. So the number itself is low. The average number, only 58% workers are happy with their job, with their income. But it declines further. So in state, you see that only around that number will say 40% people are happy with their income, and it's only 37% when it comes to local. So you immediately look at the chart and you know that overall people are, very few people are happy, roughly around maybe 50% people are happy with their job. But then the problem is actually worse when you move from federal to state to local government. And you can see that in the chart. So we don't need to look at the data, but we can just look at the chart. So, I mean, for bosses, of course, they do not have enough time. So what they need as much as information possible in the chart itself. And I mean, even if we have 5 minutes, we can give all this information and then they can make the comparison. We make a separate red line here. We specifically mention that this is state, this is local, these bars are for federal. These small changes makes a lot of difference, makes it more informative. But this is just the initiation of whatever research questions you may have in mind. We have data, we produce this chart. The fact is that very few people are happy with their job, with their current income. And between federal, state, and local, the problem is very acute at the state and the local level. But this is the initiation. So we then need to investigate further that, okay, why few people are happy with their current income. You can maybe make a cross-country comparison. So, I mean, a similar nation, where maybe more people are happier with their income, what kind of income level do they enjoy? So that we can say that, okay, in Nigeria for similar job, the pay that is offered is maybe 15% lower than other country where relatively more people are happy with their income. And within organizations itself, we can make a comparison that why federal governments can maybe offer more wages to their people, because maybe that's the most important reason why people are happy with their income. And then you can look at why state governments cannot offer higher wages similar to what federal governments offer. Is it because the state governments do not have enough revenue? Maybe possibly that is the case, because usually state governments have fewer revenue raising powers relative to federal. And if that is true, then why is it that the state and local governments raise fewer revenue, and maybe what can be done to fix it? So there's a series of questions which is linked to this particular chart. This is just the start of any this research question, if you are interested in it. But then it's a powerful way of just visualizing the data, very basic information, but it captures the essence of what we are trying to show through the data. Also, we are trying to capture as much information as possible in one chart. There could be many other ways. This is just one of the various ways that we have. But yeah, this is what I have for now. I have like 10 minutes left. I understand you may be having many more questions, and maybe you do not relate with the data. So feel free to, if you have any other questions, do let me know. We'll try to answer. And if you want us to work on a data set which you guys currently are working on, and maybe then we can maybe engage more and we can work together on some of the charts which you already have produced, and maybe we can discuss some of those charts. But yeah, I mean, we have around 10 minutes. Please, any questions if you have, please feel free to ask. I will maybe stop sharing my screen now. Yeah. Or if any one of you want to tell us about some of the projects that you are working on, and something useful that you did, and maybe we can learn from your own experience, how you used your own data set, how you produced charts, and some simple chart which was very, in your what you feel was very powerful, and it captured a lot of detail and information.
Hello, Abhishek.
Yes.
Yeah, so please, do we have any sites to guide us, so those with little knowledge about the use of Excel and the use of the graphs and charts, that will guide us so we're able to catch up?
Yeah, I mean, sure, we will share some material, some like basic information which gives you. We will share that. But usually what happens in most of these things, I mean, that's true not just for Excel, but for any other package that you use, is that, I mean, you start working on it and you feel that, okay, this is not good enough. Okay, this is what maybe something could be more useful. So over a period of time, you kind of gain more experience and you know exactly how it should be presented. But the base level anyway, we will share some material, say for example in Excel, some examples of how to make some of these charts. We will look for it, we'll look up and we'll share it with all of you.